I guess I will start. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon from Berlin. On behalf of TÜSIAD and Berlin Bosphorus Initiative, I welcome you all, both our panelists and of course our viewers who have joined us here virtually. My name is Değer Akal. I'm a Berlin-based journalist and will moderate today's webinar organized on the occasion of the 60th anniversary of Germany-Turkey recruitment agreement. An agreement that has changed Germany, an agreement that has shaped lives of millions and that has established a very strong bond between Germany and Turkey. First, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Hüseyin Geliş. Dr. Hüseyin Geliş, as you all know, is the president and CEO of Siemens Turkey, but he is also the president of BBI Executive Board and TÜSIAD Germany Network. Dr. Geliş, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the TÜSIAD Berlin Bosphorus webinar on the 60th anniversary of the German-Turkey recruitment agreement from myself as well. Yesterday, while thinking about today's event, I asked myself, why is it so important to remember and reflect this special agreement? My grandfather left his country in the early 1920s. And my parents were the generation who emigrated post this recruitment agreement. So its impact here, emigration, is personal, hence emotional, and in a manner of speaking, fundamental consequential, something that we and probably the next generations to come can build upon. I personally believe profoundly that the German-Turkish recruitment agreement had and will have, going forward, a significant impact to the European migration history. It triggered a change in social, economic, and political relationship and connectivity between both countries and Europe with an unprecedented dimension. Why did it happen? What was the driving force, the need for such an agreement overall? Let's remember maybe shortly, in the early 1960s, the post-war reconstruction of Europe was still in process, and the economies of many Western European countries needed one particular resource, and that was labor. And in Turkey? In Turkey, after the making of the 1961 constitution, the export of surplus labor power was a lever of the development policy with the aim to manage the reduction of unemployment. For this reason, and to promote this policy, Turkey first signed with high interest a bilateral labor recruitment agreement with the Federal Republic of Germany in 1961, 60 years ago. This agreement was the beginning of other similar bilateral agreements specifying the general conditions of recruitment, employment, and wages with other governments. It is of significance, however, to note that with the exception of the mass outflow of its non-Muslim population of the early 1920s, which was part of the nation-building process in the country, emigration from Turkey remained limited until the early 1960s. Further, it should be noted that the German-Turkey recruitment agreement never talked or promoted emigration in a classic sense. As an example, while Australian or US immigration policy was based upon the expectation of permanent settlement of immigrants, Turkish-German immigration policy was guest worker oriented. De facto, however, we know it turned out to be the opposite. Today, we will discuss in two parts with our distinguished speakers the economic, social, and political consequences of this German-Turkish recruitment agreement. Moderated by foreign policy correspondent Değer Akal, to whom, with pleasure, I'd like to pass the floor back. Enjoy the event.
Thank you very much, Dr. Geliş. And let's start with the first part of our webinar. During this session, we will focus on the contribution of the Turkish workforce to the economic miracle of Germany and to the role actually that foreign workforce plays in the German labor market. First, let me introduce you our panelists. Dr. Gunilla Finke from the Federal Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs. Dr. Finke is head of division responsible for basic issues of migration and integration policies, which are actually very important. And we have Dr. Jesher Aydin with us. Dr. Aydin is lecturer at the Hamburg Protestant University and senior researcher at Foreign Policy Institute, METU. Dr. Keller was supposed to be with us, Dr. Keller from the Confederation of German Employers Association, but unfortunately this morning we were informed that he will not be able to attend, so we will wish him a good and quick recovery. During this webinar, we will also have questions and answers. So dear audience, you will be able to submit us questions to our panelists through the chat function, through the Q&A function, and we'll love to hear from you. And please do send your questions so we can also engage in a discussion. So we will start with Dr. Gunilla Finke. With regards to the labor agreement signed with Turkey, could you elaborate on the economic contributions of foreign workforce to the labor market then and now?
Thank you so very much for the invitation and the chance to be with you here tonight for this very important topic. And I have to say, it also comes, I think, for most German participants as a relief to once not talk about the corona pandemic, but to be talking about something with a little bit of a more long-term perspective and maybe also a little bit more festive and commemorative. The contribution, the economic contribution of the migration from Turkey can, I think, not be underestimated. What we really have to see is that at the time, people came without any kind of support structure. People who came were really pioneers who had to build their life from scratch in Germany. Up to 1973, nearly 1 million of Turkish nationals moved to Germany in order to work. And then there was still their families coming later on. So it's quite a number, and they really had a huge part of the economic wonder, as it was called, after the post-war or in the post-war period in Germany. And I think Germany really has to be grateful for that for a long, long time. What is also not really known, and I would like to stress, is that what is still called the guest worker migration, that especially guest worker migration from Turkey was not a migration that was purely people who went then to do helpers jobs in Germany. 1/3 of the immigrants who came to Germany at that time were qualified people who had a qualified professional degree from Turkey, and they also brought that in. This is really interesting because in the beginning, as you mentioned, Dr. Gelish, it was thought that people would come on a rotation principle. So they would stay for 2 years and then would go back to Turkey, and new immigrants would come and replace them. But German companies didn't want that. They realized that they had really qualified labor, and they wanted to keep the people that were working for them. So the treaty had a very short treaty, it's only 2 pages, had to be changed, and people would be able then to stay on longer. And I think this is important because still immigration to Germany contributes enormously to economic growth. Right before the corona pandemic, so in the years from 2013 to 2019, we had 4 million more people in work in Germany, quite an increase, and 50% of that was from immigrants. So immigrants really are an important driver in the German labor force and help the economy grow. Let me maybe go to one point which I always find important, and that is what we learned from those 60 years of the Germany-Turkey recruitment agreement. And I think one really important point we learned is that countries are looking abroad for labor to meet labor shortages in their economy, and then it's people who come. As the writer, the Swiss writer Max Frisch said, no, we called for labor, and human beings came with all their needs. So it's really important to look at migration and integration that as a way of two sides of the same coin, that you can only have successful migration if you also have successful integration. People won't come otherwise. And I'd like to point out a few factors I think that are still, that used to be important at the time, but are still important today. And that, for one, is the support for language learning. There was no support at the time. People didn't even expect the Turkish so-called guest workers to learn German, but learning German is one key factor for a successful integration in the labor market and into society, with a very, very few exceptions where it would be sufficient to speak English, but it's very few exceptions. The recognition of professional qualifications from abroad, very important topic, very difficult to finding a job that is appropriate to the level of qualification, not only for the immigrant, but also for the spouse, very important. The satisfaction, we have done a lot of studies, the satisfaction of the spouses is the key factor in deciding whether the immigrant family will stay or will move back over a longer period of time, very important factor. And then of course, good schools for the children, available housing, and a successful companies are learning the lesson that they really have to do more to be actively onboarding people that are coming also from abroad. And of course, being welcomed, that's a major factor, being welcome, having the feeling of being welcomed in the communities and in public life. So as I said, there was no support for all that 60 years ago. People came on their own and they were left on their nearly no support. They were really pioneers. And we have learned a lot from that. And we're also in a much better position right now, but it's still far from perfect. Maybe just quickly, 2 more points then. Language learning, I think, is very good, but the question of the recognition of foreign credentials is still a very cumbersome, very difficult procedure. There's still not a lot of risk-taking within German companies, in the sense that we're very orientated towards qualifications, formal qualifications, and not really willing to give people a chance we just think might be able to do the job. We want to know for 100% sure beforehand that they will be able to do it. And the activities at the local level are, I think, increasing, but still the area of work is the area where there's the most complaints of discrimination with the Federal Agency of Anti-Discrimination. So I think there's still something to be done.
Dr. Finke, thank you very much. You outlined some crucial factors for actually a social coexistence, a good social life in cohesion. So I thank you a lot. I will turn to dear Dr. Yeşelay'dan. And actually, just like Dr. Finke said, it was a agreement of 2 pages. Signed 60 years ago. As far as I know, it was an exchange of notes between Turkey and Germany. And today, approximately 3 million people with Turkish roots live in Germany, and they constitute the largest minority group. Could you share your views on the impacts of this agreement and the contributions, actually, of the foreign workers in Germany?
Yes, of course. But first of all, let me express my thanks. Thanks for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here to discuss with you. And I actually brought slides with me, but I will first answer your question. What did the Turkish workers contributed to Germany? First of all, they contributed to the German industry. They were occupied in jobs which was not very attractive for the German workers. Either it wasn't attractive or the German workers were too expensive. So therefore, the Turkish labor workers contributed to the effectiveness of the German labor force, and German goods became more compatible in the world market, for example. And of course, they also allowed social part of mobility. So they could have better jobs. German natives could become better jobs, and they achieved social upwards mobility. And of course, the Turkish laborers made Germany, and together with other migrants, of course, with Italians, with people, migrants from Italia from Spain, from Portugal, from Yugoslavia. They made Germany more open, more multicultural, and more cosmopolitan, I would say. So, and if you look at the cities in Germany, we have cosmopolitan cities. It was in the 50s different than today. And Mrs. Finke said it was this labor agreement was due to the labor shortage. It is true, I agree, but there was also a political reason behind the labor recruitment argument. So otherwise, we should ask why from Turkey. Germany could also have more workers from Italy, from Yugoslavia, or from Spain. If Turkey wouldn't be in the NATO, Germany, we wouldn't have this labor labor recruitment agreement between these two countries, because for Germany, the stability, political stability of Turkey was very important, because it was a NATO country and it was at the southern flank of the Soviet Union. So we don't forget this dimension, this geopolitical dimensions. And of course, there was also a domestic political dimension. So if you look at the 1950s, for example, of course, there are shortage of labor, but there is also a huge power of labor organizations, for example, trade unions, for example. So this was, from the perspective of the German industry, not so good. So they needed also labor workers in order to curtail this power of trade unions. So otherwise, it was not alternativeless. The German industry had two alternatives: either bringing workers from outside, from countries such as Turkey, Italy, or to rationalize the German industry. So maybe it would be more costful to rationalize in the 60s and the 50s. So we don't have forget these dimensions. And no, if I have time,
yes, of course.
Yes?
It would be great.
Like,
I mean,
yes.
You elaborated on the strategic political aspect, which is very, very crucial.
Yes.
And we look forward to your presentation.
Yes, I would show you just one slide. Let me. You see it?
We see it. Yes.
Yes, I would like to discuss this slide, for example. What we see here, that the migration from Turkey to Germany has many waves, for example, ups and downs. So, first up, it started in 61. Before 61, there were Turkish workers in Germany as well. They came with their own initiatives to Germany, but it was a very small group. So up to 2,000 Turkish workers were in Germany. But with this agreement, it started the mass migration, and it culminated in 1973. Then we have another wave up, increase of immigration until 2080s, and then we have then after 1948, 58, another increase. So why we have this sharp decrease? Because Germany introduced visa for Turkish citizens. for people from Turkey. And here we have a sharp decrease because we have at 1973 this labor recruitment stop. The German government stopped and forbid labor recruitment from Turkey. And then we have in the 90s and the 2000s, it's remained stable. What shows us this slide? It shows that, for example, the overall trend is going to decrease. We have a decrease of the immigration, and I don't believe that we will again an increase like in the 70s or like in the 80s, because the German labor market has not the capabilities to absorb huge numbers of workers from Turkey or from other countries. And we also learn from this slide that this virus the one reason of this virus is, for example, the situation of the labor market in Germany in times of increasing here in, for example, 67. In Germany, there was a small or little economic crisis. There was a increase in unemployment, for example. In times of unemployment, immigration decreases, and in time of expansion, immigration increases, and political decisions play a great part in this migration process. For example, labor recruitment stop, and for example, in the 80s there was a policy of return migration, for example, by the Helmut Kohl government. He supported return migration, for example, with some incentives, some financial incentives. And here in the year of 2000, we have a new naturalization law in Germany. Naturalization became easy in Germany. So it was the right. If you fulfill all the requirements, you can apply for citizenship, for German citizenship. And after 2000, the number of Turkish citizens in Germany is on the decrease. So we have now only 1.3 million Turkish citizens. And also the number of Turks overall, with and without German citizens, is also on the decrease as well. Let me show another, then I will finish. Here, this slide shows that we have a balance of 8,000 plus in Turkish-German migration, and the number of Turks in Germany is 2.7. It is also on the decrease. In 2018, it was 2.9 million, for example. This is also a natural decrease. Some older people are dying or returning to Turkey and so on. And let me just 1 minute summarize what I said before. First of all, we can say Turkish workers contributed to the competitiveness of German industry. They made social advancements possible for many locals, and Germany became more culturally diverse than ever, and they built also transnational bridges between Turkey and Germany. We don't have to understand this migration just in one way. Migration in both directions. There are also returnees, for example. More than 2 million Turks returned to Turkey. There are millions of people in Turkey living in Turkey. They have connections to Germany because someone in their family or in their friendships groups have been in Germany, for example. And this is very important. And it is also important, for example, just some small figures, for example. There are a lot of Turkish companies in Germany, approximately 96,000, and they employ, for example, 500,000 workers, and they have an annual turnover of 50 billion euros. And of course, on the other side, there are also a lot of German companies and also German foreign direct investment. You can say, you can ask now, what has this to do with Germany? I would answer a lot, because in Germany, if we would have this migration movement between Turkey and Germany, we wouldn't have such an economic integration between two countries. So if when, for example, a German company went to Turkey and in order to have a share in a Turkish company, or when they invest, they take also their own workers, German workers, for example, to Turkey. And I met in Turkey a lot of German CEOs, for example, either in German companies or in German or in Turkish companies, for example. And of course, you don't have to forget 5 million Germans or people from Germany, let's say people from Germany, they visit as a tourist Turkey, for example, and we can say migration, one very important result of the migration is also integration of both countries in economic terms, I would say. And here I would stop and thank you for your attention, and if you have questions, of course.
Dr. Aydin, I thank you very much. You shared important figures with us, but just to have time to answer, to ask you questions from our audience and also my questions, I would like to start with Dr. Finke. It's a hot topic. It's a very difficult topic, and demographic trends should also show us that Germany is aging and the population brings new challenges to the economy. And many experts and employers actually are concerned about future gaps in the labor supply. I would like to know, how do you think will Germany deal with this challenge? And what are the prospects and limits and problems associated with actually migration of skilled workers to Germany?
Very fitting, I'd say that today there was a new study that came out from the Research Institute of the Federal Agency for Labor. And they calculated that if Germany wants to keep its labor force constant, it will need 400,000 immigrants per year, and that is net immigration. There's a big, must be aware of, there's a net big difference between those different kinds of immigration. So for example, in 2019, right before the corona pandemic, 1.6 million immigrants came into Germany, but also 1.2 million left the country. So the net immigration was only 400,000. And this research institute, the IAB in German, they calculated that we would have to maintain that level. We didn't have that level last year in 2020. And we have had many other years where we hadn't 400,000. So they say we should actually try to get 400,000 immigrants per year. That includes skilled immigrants and also not so skilled immigrants. I think the question on how to get more skilled immigrants that have positive impact on the German economy is kind of the $1 million question in Germany right now with the aging population. We have the baby boomers who are starting to get slow or come closer to the pension. I was born in 1976. This is the cohort, the year with the least births ever. 1977 was already a little bit better again, but 76 is really sort of the pitfall. And this is important because I'm not quite new in my job, so you're aware that the baby boomers, they're in their 50s, and of course we have sort of increasing problems in the years to come. So many people then say that the legal system for immigration is so restrictive. And I think this is one of the very big myths that we have out there. I think Germany has, and this has been proven in studies, a very liberal immigration scheme, but it is in some instances, and sometimes too often, sabotaged by bureaucracy. So the scheme itself is liberal, but the practice isn't so much. Why do I say that we have a liberal immigration scheme? Let's look at the law, the current situation. So this means the situation before we had the Skilled Immigration Act, but then also now including the Skilled Immigration Act. The Skilled Immigration Act came into effect in March 2020, 2 weeks before we had the national a lockdown with all the borders closed, you might remember. So I think I have to say, in my worst nightmares, I would not have thought that we are negotiating a new law for immigration, and then 2 weeks later, all borders are closed. I would not have held that possible. And so this means that, of course, we don't really know all the effects of the law because we haven't seen them in practice. But just from the legal point, qualified immigrants can come to Germany once they have a work contract and they have their qualifications recognized. They can also come to look for a job in Germany, and they can come to do training to get full recognition of professional qualifications. So this is, I think, pretty liberal in the sense of there's no, for example, no language requirement attached to just working in Germany. Permanent residency, if you earn more than 57,000 euros a year, you speak German at B1 level, which means that if you have a good proficiency, you are entitled to get German permanent residency after only 21 months. That's very quick. So less than 2 years, you have to be here in Germany, speak the language, and earn 57,000 euros a year. You can get permanent residence. International graduates of German universities can stay on after graduation for 2 years to look for a job that would be then appropriate for the level of qualification. And during those 2 years, they can work in any job they want. They can even work at McDonald's if they want to. So I think also that is pretty liberal. Unqualified labor, of course, that's a little bit more complicated. You must be aware of sort of bilateral treaties and then the West Balkan regulation where up to 25,000 people can come every year. And the coalition parties that are now negotiating, the traffic light coalition parties have already said that they want to add a second pillar to the German immigration scheme with the point system. So where if you meet a certain number of points, you can come even if you don't have a work contract before coming to Germany. So I think this is a liberal scheme, but we are a federal state. We have more than 1,300 agencies that are responsible for the recognition of professional degrees from abroad. We have foreigners' office in every single town with more than 50,000 inhabitants. So the practice of how the law is implemented in Germany is very divergent. And it is many times much more complicated in practice than it was thought by the parliament when the law was passed to be. So this means that in the end, it is a cumbersome, it is a difficult process to start immigration from abroad, especially to get the credentials recognized. This is the most complicated. We are aware of that as a government. That's why also with the Skilled Immigration Act, we started the Service Center for Professional Recognition that is supposed to be a guide through this kind of jungle of recognition of diplomas. We will help all people who are still abroad to get their diplomas recognized, to answer all the questions, to really sort of be the institution that will also then forward all the applications, already make a check firsthand, and really actively counsel on what is needed. There is also the Recognition Finder, which is an online tool to help you get all the necessary requirements for the recognition. And then there's a website which is called Make It in Germany, where there's also job offers available. So I think there is some tools, but the process still for everyone is quite a long investment before immigration. And then for many countries, Germany is not so attractive, given also the language, the climate. And of course, it always depends on the economic situation and the attractiveness of the German industry compared to the situation in the host country. And the recruiting is also sometimes more complicated. And this is something I also know with Turkey, why many companies then prefer to make intercompany transfers as an easier way to sort of bring in new labor. You might have a dependency in Turkey, hire people there, bring those people then to Germany as an easier way for immigration.
And Dr. Finke, actually, we had a question from the audience, a similar question to mine, and I hope the answer was sufficient. The question, just to give the follow-up, what are the biggest difficulties Germany is facing in recruiting skilled workers and from abroad? Do you agree that Germany needs a more modern and liberal immigration law? Apparently there's a perception, you're saying it's liberal, but there's a perception that it's not that liberal.
Well, I think there's two points to that question. One is that for many years there was this kind of academic privilege. So skilled labor meant academically skilled labor. And of course that excluded a lot of skilled workers from immigration to Germany. This has changed with the Skilled Immigration Act I was referring to that came into effect in March 2020. So only 1.5 years ago. And as I said, with the Corona pandemic, we haven't really seen the numbers that we would have liked to see. And we have also not seen the practice. For example, with the Skilled Immigration Act, we also had a new visa procedure where if companies pay a little sum, is all speeded up. It's sort of kind of a speed process for getting all the necessary documents. And this is something that should really help. It also means that a lot of the Länder in Germany have created central foreigners offices, so one foreigners office for the whole land that takes care of all those skilled labor immigration applications, will also help a lot, because obviously if you do a lot of them and you know sort of all the regulation, you're quicker, you're more proficient, you're more competent to help people to really find a way to immigrate to Germany. I think this is point one where we changed the law and the perspective will have to change afterwards. The other problem which I already mentioned is, I think, the recognition of foreign diplomas, of the foreign credentials, which in theory, yes, will work, but in practice many times can be very cumbersome and can also just be a burden for potential immigrants to come to Germany when they compare whether they go to Canada, United States, Great Britain, or Germany. It might be that the other countries are just more flexible in the sense of letting in and then continuing to check on. While in Germany, in theory, most cases you will have to get the full recognition before immigrating to Germany. So in that sense, yes, it is complicated, but the overall structure, I'd say, is rather liberal.
Thank you very much. I have a question from the audience to Yaşar Aydın. How does he evaluate the far-right threats and AfD? How could social coexistence be strengthened? And I just want to, with this question, I want to remind you all of the murderous attacks in Mölln, like 29 years ago today. Bahide Aslan, Yeliz Aslan, and Ayşe Yılmaz were killed in a fire started by neo-Nazis. And we wish to pay our respect to all of the victims. And Dr. Aydın, it's a tough issue. Germany is a very open country, is a culturally, ethnically, and religiously diverse. And I personally enjoy living in Germany with all this openness that I can live. But it's a reality that polarization between advocates of openness and those who strongly oppose, even if it's a minority, it is evident. So what the question is important over our viewers. What is your assessment? How can, threats to social cohesion, what could be done?
First of all, we have to differ between right-wing populism, nationalist populism, and right-wing terrorism. You mentioned Halle and other terrorist attacks. These are different things. Of course, there are connections, links between them, but there are different phenomena. I understand the increase of AfD, Alternative for Germany, in the global context. If you look if you have a look on a global scale, we experience in different parts of the world an increase of populism, right-wing populism, United States and other countries and Hungary and so on. This is the first thing. The second is in Germany, we have to ask the question, why do we have a right-wing populism? In South Europe, for example, we have a left-wing populism. So the left-wing populism in Italy, for example, or in Greek or in Spain, is more anti-austerity politics. They are protesting against austerity politics, liberal politics. But in Germany, we have an anti-migrant right-wing populism. It is because of the, first of all, migration. And you can also say, of course, there are also immigration into Italy, but Italy has a different social system. The social system in Italy based more on patronage, for example. In Germany, the social system functions according to universal values. And the right-wing populism is a sort of welfare chauvinism, for example. People fear that German social system could be collapsed, and they fear that, for example, immigrants put the wages down, for example. So this is also a mechanism of migration. If you have too much labor force, then the wage will decrease, and if we have less, then it will increase. We have also take such mechanisms, economic mechanisms, into account. And in Germany, we had also this is another reason why AfD is so strong, because the center became more stronger by the chancellorship of Merkel, for example. Merkel moved the CDU, Christian Democrats, more to the center, and she was not able to integrate these people, to keep these people in her party, for example. For 20 years or 20, 30 years, we had a Helmut Kohl, for example, or a Strauss in Bavaria, who was able to keep such people, such politics in his party. So it was good that Merkel became more liberal and more center politics, but it had the consequence that a lot of people who were not all, I wouldn't say that all of these people was or were in the CDU, for example, and now there is also an estrangement between the political class and the electors, for example, and the people. We don't have great integrative figures, for example, such as Helmut Schmidt or Kohl, for example, and therefore it is easy for populist politicians to mobilize these people. And she also asked me, how could social coexistence best strengthened?
But very briefly, because
very briefly, very important would be to strengthen, for example, or to fight, for example, social inequality. For example, social inequality has been on the increase in Germany since 10, 20 years. It is important that we have better jobs in Germany, more wages. So German economy is strong enough, and it can give more wages, for example. If we manage this, then the support for AfD will be decreased again.
Dr. Eisen and Dr. Finke, I thank you both for your very insightful contributions, but we have to move on to the second part of our webinar. And who do we have in this session? We have, let me briefly introduce you, our panelists, Dr. İbrahim Karasu, Managing Director of Association of German Banks, Dr. Ahmet Lokullu, Director of Turkish-German Energy and Environmental Institute, Özcan Mutlu, President of Disability and Rehabilitation Sports Association, Bilkay Öney, Managing Director of Berlin State Office for Building and Management, and Coşkun Yasa, Head of Turkish Network of Daimler. So for a long time, the assumption was, as other panelists have elaborated on, the guest workers would go back in 2 years and their children wouldn't come to Germany. But today, those who arrived back then, their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren have become an integral part of Germany. They do shape the future of this country as well. They participate in shaping it. And with all of our wonderful speakers here today, we will focus on personal accounts. And let me turn to Dr. Karasu. We would like to start with you.
Thank you, Mrs. Akal, and dear President, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your invitation and to speak here. The topic of your panel today is diversity and inclusion in German labor market. And the Turkish immigrants, they are in our focus today. And I try to give you some personal impressions, but also the view from German banks recent last years. Turkish immigrants living in Europe, and of course not only in Germany, in Europe and Germany, have contributed in many different fields to the countries they live in and to Turkey with their outstanding efforts and hard work in the last 60 years. You can remember the moderator of Radio Köln, Yüksel Pazarkaya.
Yes.
Yüksel Pazarkaya once said that the people of the first generation, the first immigrants from end of 50s and 60s, were brave heroes. Ladies and gentlemen, I fully agree with him. They were indeed brave heroes. These brave heroes who came from different countries, even from Turkey to Germany as Gastarbeiter, deserve our particular respect. So I have to say this before I start my speech. The type of immigration or migration has changed a lot during the last decades or last years. On the one hand, there are refugees, as you know, and on the other hand, there are immigrants. I stress the word immigrants, not only refugees or migrants, who are recruited as skilled workers. Banks, just like many other large and small companies and even startups like fintechs, are now desperately looking for qualified experts in innovative digitization areas such as artificial intelligence, cloud and data economy, blockchain, cryptocurrencies, biometrics, cybersecurity, etc. These attracts, ladies and gentlemen, many students, university graduates, and qualified young staff abroad, including to Europe, to US, to Asia, but also to Germany. We often read about the so-called battle for talents. According to a recent survey by the German Chamber of Industry and Commerce, a shortage of skilled workers is a structural challenge and is slowing down economic growth enormously. What Mrs. Finke mentioned, I guess we need more than 400,000 people, human resources, every year in the background of aging of the society and some other factors. Many companies also have production sites abroad. This means that they have to adapt to employees and customers with different cultural backgrounds. Most important from the HR perspective is the labor mobility. Foreign assignments of the respective locals, like the labor migration for economic reasons or cultural curiosity, leads to a mix of workers. Employment-oriented migration and inclusion contribute significantly to a sustainable economic activity, growth, and prosperity. Sustainability is not just about protecting the environment. It also means diversity and equal opportunities. Diversity, participation, and recognition are becoming more and more important in a world that is changing rapidly. Migration and the resulting diversity is a global social phenomenon and has several consequences. One of the most important, it affects our coexistence on all levels of society and economy. It affects every one of us, especially companies, and of course, also banks. That is why banks support diversity. Banks will respect and consolidate these values even more strongly in their organizations. Maybe you read in the last weeks by the Employers Association of the private banking industry. The banks are part of Germany's largest diversity network with over 4,000 organizations. Many banks around the quarter have already signed the diversity charter, and some of them from the very beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, diversity increases the success of companies. I think there is no discussion more about this phenomenon. A study by the Boston Consulting Group from October last year shows, for example, that companies with various management teams, not only among workers in the fabric halls and whatever, in management team, in top management team, achieve an EBIT margin that is 9 percentage points higher than average. This, recognized, is increasingly finding its way into the German economy. Diversity is the catalyst of innovation. And for me, the diversity is not just gender. It is also about age, experience, cultural, religious, and ethnic backgrounds, and about everyone having the same opportunities and the same opportunities with us. Everyone's being treated equally. New initiatives, organizations, and projects around diversity arise every day. You can look into newsletter, you can look in social media, you read everyone, so much information in the newspaper and social media. Wherever you look, the public debate on the subject does not stop. The downright hype is particularly impressive on days like Diversity Day or International Women's Day, or like the day like today, 60 years anniversary about the immigration from Turkey, when companies passionately want to each other with their extravagant statements on the importance of diversity and the display of glorious rainbow colors. Even the most conservative companies seem to have understood in the meantime that they somehow have to follow this trend. Otherwise, they will lose the battle for the best talents. But what is really behind all these beautiful words and the pretty brochures, pretty pictures? Ladies and gentlemen, just waving rainbow flags on social networks, on colorful glossy brochures are not enough. What do we need? First of all, so I didn't talk only about banks and companies, but we need an open society. We just have to create the basis earlier in the schools, in the kindergarten, in the companies, everywhere. We must invest more in education and equal opportunities. I double stress equal opportunities. Second, we need to implement systematically serious structural changes in organizations like diversity manager or diversity committee. I mean, not any committee against discrimination, whatever. It is too much negative from my view. We need a positive approach, positive zeitgeist. This diversity manager should ensure equal opportunities both on management and expert levels, not only on expert levels. Diversity funding program, any management, any committee without funding is nothing. So diversity funding program inside of companies, organizations is necessary, is important in order to reach success and to change the society and the companies and the economy. And last but not least, diversity score or ranking for companies, government agencies, not only companies and private industry, also all other institutions in the society should get in order to check the level of equal opportunities, the level of diversity, which doesn't mean any glossy brochures. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karasu. The very important figures and very, very important informations. I just wanted to remind our panelists that we don't have too much time. I don't like to be disrupted, so I don't like to disrupt either. So just wanted to remind you all. Dr. Ahmet Lokullu, Director of Turkish Germany Energy Environmental Institute. You are among the entrepreneurs contributing to the German and I guess Turkish economy both. Can you tell us your journey and how you view inclusion and diversity?
It's a pleasure for me to be part of this meeting. I have to give a short detail about my history. When I came out, what I did and what I am doing now, and the way of thinking which I have. I came in the year 1987 to Germany as a student. I studied in different universities, Dortmund, Essen, Technical University Aachen, and so on. And then after my PhD work, I was working at a research center in Jülich in field of technological development, fuel cells, hydrogen production, and so on, in technical issues. Then I founded a company. It was actually a startup from Research Center Jülich to develop technologies for so-called solar-based cooling. When you are from southern and live in north, and you have a quite different relation to sun. The sun is not for you a source of heat, but source of cold. That was the main idea. And I developed a company, founded a company and developed and then extend in different countries. And also in Turkey, we have a production size and we have our staff also there. And about overall years, we distributed more than 40 plants in 15 countries almost. And we are fighting now in different fronts for fighting of climate change. This is exactly my main focus. Not only if I am Turkish origin, I am German, I don't know, this is really not my main question. And I do not something special to feel as German or Turk or and so on. Before pandemic, I spent more than 70–80% of my time in different countries, as I mentioned, with main focus to solve the problems which the mankind have. And we think that we are able to solve a part of these problems with our technologies, with our ideas and so on. This is really my being. And it's a question of perception. How do you think? How do you manage? We are responsible for our actions. I do it, but really, again, not if I am here. By the way, our company is located between Germany and Netherlands. I cross, sorry, actually every day brought from Germany to Netherlands and back. I don't know where I am, and I know what I do. And that is exactly the philosophy which I have, and you can ask everything what you want, but with exception of my age and as you mentioned before.
Yes. So we will move on, and I think we will have questions later on altogether. I think we have, but thank you, Dr. Lokulu. And I will turn to Özcan Mutlu. Özcan Bey, hoş geldiniz. I got to know you when you were a parliamentarian. I'm not that old. I'm here in Germany since 2007. So for me, I got to know you when you were a parliamentarian, and you have also gone through very interesting phases. Could you elaborate on them? We have approximately 8 minutes. You asked me, I couldn't respond. I'm sorry. Özcan Bey?
That was a question to me. I thought Bilkay is in charge now. Because after 2 men, okay, I can start. Thank you very much, Deir. I'm sorry missing your first sentence. When I started in 1992 in the District Council of Kreuzberg, I was one of the very few elected members of a political entity. It was, of course, a big surprise for many people, and people slowly get used to it that even migrants, Turkish migrants, can participate. 2 years later, you all know him very well. Cem Özdemir got elected into the German Bundestag. At that time, it was a big surprise for the whole of Germany. And when we look back from then to now, a lot of things have changed, of course, with our participation in politics. People got used to it, but still, we do have a lot of problems. We are talking about a population which consists of almost 1/4 of immigrants. 1/4 of the population in Germany has a non-German background. And if you look at the political arena, if you look at the district councils, if you look at the Länderkammer, if you look at the Bundesländer, the parliament, the state parliaments, or even in the German Bundestag, if you compare, there's a big difference. Today, we have almost 11% of the members of the German parliament in all parties, fortunately. with a non-German background, but the portion of the population is 26%. So there's a lot of things still to do, especially in the parties. If you talk about politics today, and there's a coalition, there are coalition talks going on right now, and within the big group, which is dealing with the coalition programs, there is no person with non-German background. Even Cem Özdemir is not in this larger group. If you watch at the different lists with cabinet members, we do not see any member of cabinet, future cabinet, with person with non-German background. And that is for me a clear sign that the politicians, especially the political parties, has to learn a lot still. Even we did a big progress from 1992 until now, there is a huge way to go still. I will share an anecdote with you and stop at that point to have also time for Q&A. I started in the district council and went until to the highest stage, the German Bundestag, a place where everybody is dreaming of to go to when he or she is in politics. So we had this debate on dual citizenship in the German parliament, Grand Coalition, and I was one of the speakers. Before I spoke, a Christian Democrat colleague of mine was on stage and talking, and he pointed at me, directly at me, because I was in the front row. In the Green Party, the speakers are always in the front row. So he pointed at me and said, Mr. Mutlu, you and your President Erdogan. So everybody was quiet. That was happening in the German Bundestag. He was pointing at the German member of the Bundestag. I have no dual citizenship. I have no second choice or second option to leave this country or whatever. And I was talking about dual citizenship, and this colleague of mine was pointing at me as the Turkish guy. His president is not Frank-Walter Steinmeier, his president is Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Everybody who knows me a little bit, he or she will also know that I'm one of the opponents of the politics of Ankara. So in worst case, I would be referring Erdogan to as my president. But that was happening in the German Bundestag. And that was for me another clear sign, besides all the steps we have to do in our judicial system, in our society, etc., even in politics, we have to do a lot, and there's a long way to go. And this traffic jam coalition talks show that there's many things to do. But I'm in general a very optimistic person. I've wrote a book, you see it here, thank you very much, about the 60 years of German-Turkish guest worker program. And when you look at this stories in this book, there are 27 biographies. You will see that we went all through the same obstacles, through the same problems in school, in the society, at the working place. But we still did succeed. We did succeed, even there were big hurdles. We had to be maybe 2 steps forward than our fellow students in the university or at the working place or wherever, but we did succeed. And that shows to me that even the process is going maybe slowly, soon or late, even the AfD politicians will realize and recognize that we are part of society and they can do whatever they want. They won't get rid of us. That is very important. The glass is half full, it's not half empty. Thank you very much, Dad.
Thank you very much, Jean-Claude. These are very important remarks, and I would like to turn to Bilkay Öney. Bilkay Öney is also a very important example and role model for especially women and young girls in Germany. BK, the floor is yours. I mean, Özcan Mutlu just underlined, of course, there are still problems and shortcomings and challenges, but I think all of you show that success is also possible.
Thank you for having me here. Can you hear me? Because I'm...
Yes.
Okay. Well, actually, everything is already said, but not from everybody. So I hope I will not bore you with my comments. No. We have heard a little bit of the history to the bilateral recruitment agreement with Turkey, and I'm very happy to see Gunilla here and also Özcan. I met them in the Young Leaders program, so I'm happy to see them again. And I would like to put the finger on some aspects which might be interesting for you. After the influx of, for example, Greek and Italian people as migrant workers, the so-called Gastarbeiter, the bilateral recruitment agreement with Turkey was signed in 1961. Until 73, many Turkish people migrated to Germany. We have seen the numbers from the professor. But why were the Turkish so attractive for Germany's employers? Did you ever ask this question? First of all, they were very hardworking people. They were known for being very strong and hardworking people. Secondly, the Turkish migrant workers came from a hegemonic state. Therefore, they were rather loyal to their employers, obeying and maybe even submissive people. So they didn't join labor campaigns, disputes, strikes, or political participation. At that time, it was not on their horizon. They just came to work here and nothing else. And many people or many employers like these aspects. Who came? The unskilled arrived in order to work at industrial and production site, but also workers such as medical doctors and teachers came. And they improved their careers, as we can see from the BioNTech example. And they all made their way to Germany, mostly from rural areas of Turkey, and most of them stayed. Some commuted or only spent their holidays back home. No later than the 70s, it became obvious that the migrant workers evolved to immigrants. And of course, their children grew up in Western Germany. Most of them were born here, but many, even myself, were picked up from the family in Turkey only after the parents themselves were settled. So for my example, I came in 73. Willy Brandt was chancellor at that time. Helmut Schmidt took over in 74. And in these years, Turkish children benefited from the social politics made for workers and their children. Until then, children of workers couldn't get higher degrees or go to university that easily. And all this changed with the politics of the Social Democrats, which made it easier for working class people and their families, and of course for Turkish people as well. From then on, Turkish kids had improved access to secondary and even higher education that allowed to register at colleges and universities. And however, the development of the kids mostly depended on their families, their personal abilities, talents, and ambitions, and a supportive environment in and out of school. I've written about it in my article in the book, which was recently published by Özcan Mutlu. He has shown it. If you want to read about the success stories, I can highly recommend that book. It will also be translated into Turkish as well. Reklam arası. So there are some statistics which show that meanwhile, many of the Deutsch-Türken go to university and get Abitur, high school degree. when I studied at the Technical University of Berlin, it was only 3% of Turks going to university and only 1% finishing school with a diploma. So it was not very common. And now the numbers are rising, and this is also a big success. Regarding the current situation of former Gastarbeiters, it's very important for me that we do not only focus on super performers, for example, in the field of vacuum search or big business. I think we need to look on the whole picture and from a broader perspective. Success is not only about money. Success is to deal with all the difficulties you face as a minority group, as foreigners, and do not give up. There are many entrepreneurs in Germany without higher education who work hard, pay taxes, and contribute to our social security system. Last but not least, they provide jobs not only for people of Turkish origin. I'm talking about small enterprises, handcrafts, workshops, and related businesses. And I'm talking about the employees of these sectors. This is not about big money. Many people, employers and employees, work very hard for their money in order to avoid social transfer services. And for me, this is also success. As we see, the bilateral recruitment agreement with Turkey has been a success, could have been much better without facing discrimination. Gunilla has talked about it before. Without neo-Nazi groups who wanted to scare Turkish people to death, like NSU. But what do we learn, and where do we go from here? Again, Germany is now lacking labor forces. As a CEO of a Berlin-owned state company, I'm confronted with that issue on my daily business, but I'm also a normal citizen, and I do and feel and see these shortages everywhere. We need craftsmen, we need mechanics, service people, especially in the health and care sector. But we are also lacking educated people such as social workers with a bicultural background in our administration, in schools, in youth services, just to name some examples. I hope that the Berufsberatung of the Bundesagentur für Arbeit, Gunilla, I didn't know how to translate this, maybe you can help, will focus on that and will help young people on their way to work life. Not everybody is supposed to study and become a doctor or a lawyer or a politician. These are just outstanding examples, but everybody can build a good future in another field. And I think Berufsberatung could help young people to look at the big picture and find a profession with future and which makes sense. Most of the young people do not even know which possibilities exist. That's very sad. And I wish Berufsberatung would make more sense. TÜSIAD could also help young people on their way. And as there are still many young Turks who would love to come to Germany in order to work here, TÜSIAD could help by bridging the gap, using close business ties with companies, but also with the important chambers of trade and commerce. I just want to shout out to everyone here, if you have the possibility to help people, please help. Having money or having a title is nothing if you have no impact on this globus and on this society. So I always measure people by what they do, not how much money they have or which title they have. It's not important for me. For me, it's only the action which counts, and I'm confident that a precisely designed and targeted form of labor migration from Turkey to Germany will prove to be a win-win situation for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you a lot. We will quickly move on to Coşkun Bey. Coşkun Yasa, head of the Turkish network of Daimler. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. That's why I'm not sure whether we can respond to the questions, but Coşkun Yasa, we would like to listen to you now.
Thank you very much for your introduction. I'm speaking from the Daimler AG. Maybe some of you know that, our famous brand, which, because we are not only the company who has invented the car. We are also proud of the, let me say, famous brand that we have in all over the world. I want to underline this, some, let me say, first commercial statements from my company. So I want to share some slides with you because it helps you to understand why I'm speaking and to, with which topics I want to speak. As I said, first of all, I'm working for Daimler as a manager in the compliance department, where we, let me say, check long-term relationships to our business partners, with our business partners, in terms of how, in terms of integrity. And integrity is a very close work to the integrity about, let me say, the integration of our Turkish community in Germany. So there are some overlapping topics there. But the reason why I'm speaking today to you is that I work also on a honorary basis for an, let me say, employee network within the Daimler, within our corporate, which is called DTT. Some of you know that network already. We call it the Turkish network of Daimler. And I like to share 3 topics with you. One, what is our network standing for and what we have done in the past so far, and also how Daimler has reacted to since 60 years to this recruitment agreement, which we are talking today. And the last topic is to highlight a little bit what was the situation of the guest workers, of the Gastarbeiter at that time. So some words, as I said, about our network. We are an official employee resource group of Daimler AG under the umbrella, and I think this is also one topic which Mr. Karasu has highlighted, under the umbrella of our diversity and inclusion organization. And we have over 1,200 members. And of course, we have started very, very small with 6 employees in 1992. And in 10 years before today, we have also an event, an internal event, which where we honored this recruitment agreement internally. And it was also published in famous newspapers like you can see here in the Handelsblatt and so on. As you can see, we have several steps like the Honorary Award in Stuttgart that we have achieved, the high state visit from former presidents of Turkey and also from Germany. And we are doing a lot of activities internally in regard to ensure that the network is staying active and to ensure that the 1,200 people, by the way, these are people who has, as Vilkay has mentioned, improved their careers as a second or third generation of the guest workers. And just one internal thing from our corporate, as you can see, after the 1st December, here we are splitting us into companies, and therefore our network will also be splitted into 2 networks. Once on the passenger cars and vans side on the Mercedes-Benz AG, and my colleague Dr. Süreyya Nejat Doğan on Daimler Truck side for the respective company there. On my next slide, and by the way, just to mention Mr. Karasu again, Daimler is a founding member, and we are the first signatory of Charter of the Diversity. As I said, some impressions how Daimler has reacted to this recruitment agreement. This picture, by the way, was researched by our colleagues from our company archive. And as you can see, there's a welcome sign at the top in different languages and also within Turkish. And Daimler has shoot this photo because they have built a so-called dormitory in English. In German, it's so-called Wohnheime for these people, and they want to recruit such people, and they want that they help Daimler to support them in their in this respective phase. As you can see, it was 1965. And as you can also see, the people there, they are curious and excited. But I think it is also to mention that on the corporate side, on the internal corporate side, there are also people who are excited about those people who are coming, because they are they have built up such a sign with a nice border on that. On the next page, also one picture from our archive. It shows some Turkish people. One of them is reading a newspaper, Hayat, for instance, and it shows also that those people like to present themselves by wearing a cravat. And Daimler wants to highlight this photo because they have not only built up a dormitory, they have provided them a good place to stay and to live their life besides their work. So this is one thing why we have shooten this photo. On the next slide, it's the not so nice and picture from Daimler. It's more the challenging situation what our guest workers have and what they are faced. And Mr. Caruso has also said brief heroes, and here you can see 4 or 5 of them. You have to imagine how the object that the person is holding on his both hands, what kind of what is this weight of this object. I think it's very hard if you consider that this is a kind of iron object. I don't know what it is exactly. Don't ask me. I'm not a technical engineer, but it seems that is a very hard and challenging work there. Also hard and challenging is this picture showing that guest workers in the front of an oven. By the way, such oven gets between 1000 and 2000 Celsius. And if you stay on the front at this position where these persons are, it approximately, we assume, 600 Celsius degree. And this is can also be seen in the attitude of the employees there, what kind of attitude they have.
Mr. Yes, I'm really sorry to interfere, but we only have 1 minute left. So just to remind you.
My last picture, sorry.
Yes, please.
Okay, no problem. This is my last picture and my last message here. This is let me say, very authentic and touching picture here from Sabri Çakar, who has made a farewell note there. And this farewell note shows how close what kind of close relationship he has built up with his machine there. Do it well, my machine, in German, written. And this shows us what kind of situation such kind of people was in that time, because they left all the complete, for instance, or in particular cases, their complete family in Turkey. And it was hard to explain what Sabri Çakar has meant here, but what we can underline is that such guest workers has taken over the will and the courage of their parents, and this means that the next generation can have the same attitude towards work like Sabri Çakır has. This means Sabri Çakır was for us in this example a role model for the next generations in terms of their attitude of their work, and I think this is a remarkable note there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm really sorry. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry. I mean, we would have wished to ask you questions, and we received some questions from the audience, but it's nice that actually Özcan, Mutlu already responded to the questions, Bilkay too, with their remarks. They already answered the questions. But just before saying goodbye to you, I want to give the virtual floor to Dr. Hüseyin Geliş. He would like to, I mean, we would want him to make the concluding remarks.
Yeah, so thank you very much there, Anam. I was just thinking about what the key messages are. And I want to really say thank you to everyone who contributed to that. We really learned today this was more just a contract. It was actually an initiative which laid down the foundation for a future cooperation and showed also the importance of diversity itself. Now, when I think about first, it started with pioneers to heroes, to entrepreneurs, to citizens, and from there actually to relatives. What I mean is Turkey and Germany are today actually relatives. We are related. We can relate to each other. We have many things in common. We also learned that, for example, through diversity itself, and I like that very much, we are really capable and able to discover new opportunities and grow together. And we shouldn't be afraid of being different or to include the difference into, let's say, amongst our circles itself. One thing we have not talked about, and that is the whole contract itself laid down a foundation of exchanging labor force, but it's not only going forward from Turkey to Germany per se. We will also saw during the Second World War in the 1930s, there were also immigrants, who escaped the National Socialism and went to Turkey, many of them highly qualified professors, and they found a home there, and they enhanced the education systems in Turkey. So I believe very profoundly, exchanging of labor force, immigration itself gives an impetus really for future growth, cooperation among the nations itself. It is not something what should divide us. It is something that brings us together. And 60 years anniversary of the German-Turkish recruitment agreement, in hindsight, we can say it was successful. It was successful, and it will definitely also make history in the years to come. Thank you very much, actually, dear Akal, for this great moderation. And even so, I said the last few words. I give it back to you to close the event just in time. 4 minutes is just excuse. Thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you a lot. Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure for me to moderate this important event. I still try to understand. There's a lot to learn. And I thank you, among all, for the great contribution of all of our panelists. And of course, Ayşe Yürekli, she contributed tremendously for this organization to happen. And I hope to see you again soon, and hopefully not only virtually. I'm bored at home. So I hope to see you all. Vielen Dank. Çok teşekkürler. Thank you a lot. Hoşça kalın.
Open the cameras for a picture now, everyone, please. And I'm sure that someone at my colleagues from TÜSIAD will take a picture. Özcan also reminded us of that. Thank you very much. And the picture comes right now. Nuranım, are you going to take the picture? I think she did, and I'm taking it as well. And have a wonderful evening from the Bosporus to wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a nice day.